Hi, Scott. Give us your name and the kind of career that you are pursuing.
Hi, Chris. Yes, Scott Weaver, and I'm retired now, but for about 15 years, I was an investment analyst, you'd say, in the stock market in Taiwan and perhaps broader Asia, Hong Kong, but mostly in Taiwan.
So, you must be so rich.
No, well, but haven't worked because that job has changed a lot. So I haven't really worked for the past 10 years. So, but kind of, at least I earned enough money to retire early, you could say, I guess. Yes, but
So,
not
it
rich.
can be a very lucrative profession, right?
Yes. So investment banking in general is in terms of money is very good. It's a very often very time intensive. You have to work many hours. A lot, I'd say it's fairly stressful, but in terms of pay, it's probably one of the best ones out there.
Tell us how you spend so many hours and why is it stressful? In what ways?
Yeah. So in terms of hours, because you're analyzing companies. So I mean, for me, we had to read Chinese newspapers because Taiwan is Chinese speaking country. So that took me time as it was translating the articles, but and modeling and just trying to come up with ways of analyzing the companies so that you can give interesting ideas and observations to customers about the companies in the industry. So that's fairly time consuming. And then as the latter years, there's more of an emphasis on calling customers. I don't know if they do that anymore, but we'd have to call funds. So perhaps 30, 40, 50 people if we put out a report and then say, here's what we were saying in our report. So it ends up being quite a bit of phone calling. The job changed in that way over the years. And then stressful. I mean, you're telling people to buy a stock and you have a target price for the stock. And if it goes the other way, it doesn't look, you're all out there for the world to see. It's published. And so it can be, that can be stressful. And then just a lot of stress too, because there's a lot of money slushing around. I mean, to get good ratings with the customers, uh, and to come up with interesting things to say, I think all of that's kind of stressful.
Yeah,
You're
because
kind
I
of on
think
your own.
on the one hand, you're very analytical, you're dealing with a lot of numbers, and that person is maybe not as comfortable dealing with the human side of things. So you really
Yeah.
have to be adept in two very different areas.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. I think someone who's like for me, I'm much more comfortable in the analyzing numbers and analyzing things and learning, and not as comfortable about calling up people and telling them what I think. And so for
Right.
me, that was just very stressful in and of itself.
Mhm.
But you're right; kind of takes two different personalities, and probably these days the latter part is maybe a little more important. I mean, now there's media to get on TV and do interviews and radio and that type of thing as well. So, I mean, for the top analysts, they would have to be quite comfortable doing interviews on TV and the radio, that type of thing.
So how is it different doing this career in Taiwan than, say, the United States? Is it very different? And what kind of education do you need to prepare yourself for such a career?
Yeah, well, I think the job has changed tremendously since I did it, and there are a lot more rules about what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say, and these days companies give projections. When I was doing it, they didn't. It was our job to come up with estimates, but now they give estimates. The companies give estimates, and the analysts spend just a lot of time saying, do they agree or not? Um, but I think probably the biggest change is a lot more restrictions on what you can say and do. The regulations are much higher. In terms of education, the people I met, because we were all young in Taiwan and not all of them were studied, but I studied economics and accounting, which was very helpful. Accounting is pretty much an essential to know. Uh, Economics very helpful. but a lot the most successful people would also be very good at, for example, in electronics. They knew the semiconductor industry. So industry knowledge, I think today is more important than accounting because actually I think the computers can do most of the accounting and the model creating. Well, we had to create it ourselves, but these days, what's going on in the industry? So if you come from an industry background, I think a lot of people worked in the electronics industry, then they become an analyst or they
I
become a
see.
investor relations person for one of the companies. That's that type of. So
Right.
that's become, I think, the most important thing probably is industry knowledge. But if you're just starting out, economics and accounting would be the key areas.
So this sounds like a good transitional job later. Like if you get into an industry and you really love it, but you need a change of pace, you could transition into a job like this later in
Yes.
life, which I never really thought about. I think that's a really great option. But
Yeah.
how do you know if you're good at doing the things that you have to do on a daily basis? Is there some way to really figure out whether this is for you before you go all whole hog into doing it? Can you
No, I don't
dabble
think
in
so. I mean,
stocks
I just kind of
beforehand?
stumbled
Or
into it. Yes. Uh, I think it's hard to tell if you would really like this job before you went into it. Because I think in a lot of other jobs, you can kind of see what other people doing that job and you can get an idea of what it's like.
right.
And I think it's very difficult to know and to get into investment banking now, you have to pass an exam anyways. It wasn't the case when I did it, but um, that's a good question. I mean, of course, if when you can be interviewing for it, the person you're interviewing with can explain to you what the job is like at that particular company and that type particular position because I think they would vary a lot from place to place. Um, but I think if you enjoy analyzing things and discussing sectors and companies, that'd be a good start.
How do you stumble on it? You said you stumbled onto this. How in the world? I have never stumbled into your career.
Oh,
How do you do
okay.
that?
Well, first of all, I mean, when I was in college, I met a girl from Taiwan and we began dating. So that's how I ended up going to Taiwan in the first place. So that was the
Okay.
first stumble. And then I just answered an ad. I never actually, when I took an MBA program, but I kind of loathed the stock market as the last place I'd ever want to work. I mean, it seemed to me just horrible. And my father always looked down upon stocks and stock market people. And
Okay.
uh, but then I just answered an ad in a local paper for an editor for a new brokerage that was just opening up in Taiwan was just opening up at the time. So they hired me as an editor, but then I had economics and there was a person in Taiwan, I mean Hong Kong, who was doing economics for Taiwan and Hong Kong and he was happy to have me do stuff on economics and send it to him. And so I kind of got into economics there. And then a new person was hired and they said, well, we want to turn you into an analyst. And then I said, okay. And so it wasn't that I ever applied. The only thing I applied for, I guess, was the editing job, but everything else just kind of happened. Well, but I think also you have to be interested in trying to help other people out. I think if you're looking at, I didn't get paid extra for doing the economics. I just thought wanted to do as much as I could do and learn as much as I could learn. And so the job didn't change, but I was doing more. And then once people saw that maybe we can use him for different things, then they asked me to do something else. So
I do think that Americans or native English speakers don't realize their value as a native English speaker in other countries and working for companies or public in the public sector outside of our country because of our English skills. Did you find that being a native English speaker helped you in your walk outside of the United States in this job in Taiwan or not?
yes, I mean, definitely that in those days, because it was opening up, there weren't many people who could write in good English about the stocks in Taiwan, and that everything was written in English. So I'd say it was crucial that that ability to speak and write in English and write fast. I read a lot of stuff, and so I agree. If you go to, I mean, it's somewhat different these days because there's Google Translate. People
Right.
get it,
That's
but
true.
in those days it was definitely. They were just anyone who could speak English with some education was in a high demand. And then if you could read and speak Chinese, because for me, I have to talk to the companies all only spoke in Chinese. So I was able to learn Chinese fast enough and well enough so that I could go and talk to people in Chinese. So I'd say today it's probably more important to also be able to speak the local language. Just having a good English ability may not be as valuable as it was 20, 30 years ago, but still valuable. But if you could have some knowledge of the local language, that'd be very helpful.
Yes, I think people who like languages can find jobs in nearly any market outside of this country because of their English ability. There's
Yes.
lots of resources to learn languages, but how in the world do you learn Chinese after you get a job in another country? That's when you started learning Chinese?
I mean, I took core classes when I worked in Washington, D.C. right after I graduated. I didn't go right to Taiwan. And the agriculture department had some Chinese classes, and I took some there. But to be honest, it's really hard to learn a language just from classes, I think. So socialize. And unfortunately, Taiwan is an easy place to socialize. So you could go to there's clubs like Rotary, Toastmasters, other types of clubs. Uh, and I lived with a Chinese family that didn't speak English, so you have to learn Chinese. So I think one key is you can't be with all the time with people whose English is better than their Chinese. You have to go to situations where you have to learn Chinese, and it was perhaps easier 40 years ago because there were not before the internet. People actually went outside and got together more often, and did activities together. But even today, I think yeah, you'd have to it'd be really it's essential to go to places and just try to communicate where you have to communicate in that language and not in your first language because otherwise you'll just end up speaking your first language all the time.
That's true. So, with your job, when you were working full time, were you able to travel much? I know now you travel a lot and you have um, some really cool hobbies, but when you're doing this investment and this very intense job, are you really tied down to a specific place or can you get out
Oh,
and
we
travel?
had to travel a lot because again, before the internet, you couldn't do Zoom calls or you could do phone calls, but um, so we would do regular trips to visit clients. The because we're a brokerage, we buy and sell stock. The clients are the ones who actually have the money and actually buy and sell the stock. We do it for them. So we many trips to visit clients and explain our sectors and the companies in meetings like 1 hour meetings. So there was a lot of travel, and then also visiting the companies. You have to visit to interview them and find out what's happening with them. And again, they were probably freer in those days to meet with people and chat. There's probably more rules these days, but um, so there was, I'd say, quite a bit of traveling, and that can be hard. I mean, it's exciting at first, but especially if the budgets get tighter, there's less luxury instead of first class and nice hotels. It gets a little, so another thing that people might not like in the end is actually the traveling can get a bit tiring. And but there's quite a bit of travel. I think these days probably less again because of Zoom calls. It's hard to justify spending a lot on airfare and hotels, which are really expensive these days, just to do things you could do by a Zoom call.
Yeah, good point. Now, if someone sees this and they think, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I want to do, maybe not in Taiwan, maybe in Taiwan, are they welcome to communicate with you through our website?
Oh yes, yes, for sure. I'd be happy to talk to people.
Are you in Taiwan right now?
No, in Toledo, Ohio.
All right, so you go back and forth. We never know where you are.
I have a 6 months, 6 months, yes.
It's so nice. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Scott. Is there anything you want to add, or are you good?
No, I think you've done an excellent job, Chris.
I
Very
think you've done
interesting.
an excellent job.
Okay.
It
Thank
was
you.
fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.